This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I've got Rick Maurer, and he is a speaker, author, consultant, helping leaders like you and myself become better leaders and helping us out through whatever means we need. And we're going to talk a lot about how we can seize moments of possibilities. We're going to talk about leading with respect instead of just like this old school way of leadership. Anyway, we'll get into that later. With all that being said, Rick, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, John. It's good to be here again.
If you don't mind, we picked up some new listeners since last time, I'm sure. So just tell the audience a little bit about kind of your background and how you got to where you are today, just to give a little refresher.
Okay. Well, for the last 25 years, my work is focused on two questions, and that's why do people support us and why do they resist us? And I've been interested in that topic for a long time, but in the early 90s, a lot of my clients were saying, how come I'm getting so much resistance to change? How come people don't listen? Why don't people get it? And I really started looking into that and developed this model of why people resist and why they support change, and which went against the conventional wisdom. And I put a book out, and some friends said, I don't know if you should do that. You shouldn't be writing about, because resistance is a bad topic. And I said, no, that's what I'm doing. And the phone started ringing, and people started saying, gee, could you help us? Because the prevailing thinking about resistance was either it's bad, or the way to deal with it is you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And like, I'll go to that meeting on Monday for you if you'll go on Tuesday. That's all minor stuff. There's much bigger stuff. And people read the book and they said, can you help us? And pretty soon I just jettisoned all the other stuff I was doing. I figured there's a lot of people who, do team building better than I do personality theories better than I do. And it's just allowed me to dive deep and to help with people with the question of how do I build more support or energy, and how do I avoid or work with resistance.
So what have you found, since last time we've talked, as far as like things, there's been this whole, what are they calling it? The Great Resignation, where people are leaving their jobs, and we're having a lot of some companies that are resistant to change. When it comes to hybrid and remote employees, and other companies that aren't. What have you seen that's different in the landscape since last time we talked?
Well, I think you really hit on it. That people are saying, wait a minute, I like my life now. Maybe I didn't like that I had to stay inside all the time, but I get to choose my hours. I get more done. And I have more agency. I have more control over myself. I think that's a big deal. And I think organizations that ignore that and say, okay, COVID is behind us. I don't think it is right now, but it should. I hope it is soon. If they say, oh, that's behind us, let's get back on track, I think they're going to be very surprised. Unless they work in a place where, there just isn't much other competition for, so people sort of are stuck there. But for the most part, I think companies and other kind of organizations need to learn that this working a hybrid way or virtually, it actually works in a lot of places and really works well. You just have to learn how to do it and be responsive.
Yeah, I think, no, I think you're 100% right. When it comes to it, why are people afraid of that change though? Like on the leadership side?
Well, I haven't asked them, but but okay. But between you and me, I think a big reason is uh, if people are in front of me, I can control them, or at least have the illusion of control.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're.
that's
I
good.
look in the
Control.
room; they're all working. Okay, that somehow there's this mythology that we build up that we have to be supervising all the time, and that people won't do anything. If you're not doing that, and that may be true, but I think it's then worth looking at. So, what is about your organization where people don't want to do the work? Because most of us, do what. So I think it's fear. It's fear that nothing will get done, or it won't have my, golden touch on a project as it's going along. So
Yeah, yeah. I think there's definitely that fear of control, not being able to control people, and I think also like if you have people in the same space, then you get this extra collaboration that you might not, or you may have to work a lot at it a little bit harder if they're scattered about and spread about. Because like you have that serendipity thing where you're just, you're walking in the building, you catch somebody that you haven't seen in a couple months. I'll start up a conversation, and this guy mentions something. You say, "Oh, well, we can help though. That our group is working on something very similar. Let's partner up, and it benefits the company." Whereas when you're remote, like when we were at lockdown and we weren't around, there were people in the company that I didn't talk to at all.
yeah.
Not because I didn't like them. It was just because I don't want to bother them. I don't have any immediate business needs, so I don't talk to them. And we missed that opportunity.
I think you're right. I mean, I work from home. I have ever since I started my consulting business. So I have a very different experience.
Yeah.
But you're right. That I think that will be a challenge. But I think it's probably a pretty easily surmountable challenge. Maybe I won't run. I can imagine places where you run into Betty in the hallway because you're on the same floor. But if you change floors, you may never see Betty again.
Exactly. Yep.
So how are we going to do that to kind of create those moments of, I don't know, more freestyle conversation so stuff can happen? I think it's really possible. I just think we need to be a bit creative about it.
Yeah. So tell me about some ways that we might be able to do that then from a leadership perspective. How can we creatively have those interactions that aren't necessarily business necessary, but that give us value that we can take somewhere else. Like, let me give you an example that
Yeah.
my wife's team did recently is she did a team builder event where they took people out to play putt-putt. So like her team's remote, but they're in the same area because, COVID, they all shut down, they all went remote, and they all met up to play putt-putt somewhere, outdoor environment, safe, whatever. But they were able to like strike up conversations that they normally wouldn't have and talk about things that weren't in a meeting set, and build some of that stuff on a regular basis. What are some other things that we can do, maybe even if our employees aren't within a distance, so we can play butt with them?
Yeah. Um, well, one thing I would do, and it really gets away from the leader having to have all the answers or being able to approve everything. I would say to the team, hey, it looks like we're doing pretty well with the actual work, but what I'm feeling is kind of a lack of kind of the human stuff. Like,
Yeah.
hey, how's your golf game? Anybody else feeling that? Is there anything we can do? Uh, and people might have really interesting uh, little ideas. I mean, one thing that just comes to mind is this actually will relate, but it didn't going to sound like it at the beginning. I was working in a healthcare facility, and there was a woman who was hired to interest physicians and their practices in affiliating with this hospital, because hospitals in the United States get their patients from the doctors. They say, "Oh yeah, we send our patients to such and such a hospital," and she said, "Our we were losing a lot of people, so a lot of doctors' practices. So we were trying to do, we need to get that back on track again, and it's not working." And she said, "What do you suggest?" And I said, "Well, what are you doing now?" And I'll call her Betty. And she said, "Well, first of all, doctors don't like meetings. It takes
Mm.
away from their work. So I go in and we have like a 20-minute meeting, and I'm really good about being punctual and saying this is not going to last more than 20 minutes or whatever. and we cover all the main things, the financial considerations, da 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 da, and then I leave. And I said, well, and she said, I said, probably you're handling the meeting well. People appreciate that short kind of meeting. But I said, Betty, you need to learn to drink more coffee. And she looked at me like, what are you talking? I said, you are the face of the hospital right now. And people, if all people see are the slides, they're not going to think differently of the hospital. I would suggest just going a little bit early and hanging out, or hanging out for a few minutes afterwards. And I can imagine, well, places and teams where I've worked on, whereas the official meeting is going to start at 9, but we all kind of agreed just to get there, just because we'd like to hang out a little bit, like 10 minutes before.
Mm-hmm.
And trying stuff like that out to see, well, does that work? And it might actually work a little bit better, since if we're doing more and more virtual stuff, we don't have this back-to-back meeting kind of stuff where we have to run across to the third building and up 7 flights of stairs. So, but I would say trying stuff to kind of build that back in. What I wouldn't do, and this is just a bias on my part, I wouldn't do goofy stuff. I mean, I wouldn't try to have some special event that's a team building event.
Yeah.
I like the idea of a team working well together, but stuff where people have to share stuff with each other to get the work done, that I like a lot. So, okay, we're going to do a pirate hunt. I don't know if there is such a thing, but some sort of thing. I think a lot of people just roll their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
By the way,
you get a lot of people that don't want to participate once you say it's team building. Like once you say it, something like that, there's this bias that pops up that says, I'm not interested at all. But if it's more organic, like you're talking about getting coffee or something, or hang out a little bit afterwards, people are more open to that.
Yeah. In fact, I'll tell you one story. I was working with an engineering firm, and one of the managers had to make a presentation to the hourly workers. And it was a polite meeting. I mean, there's nothing bad happening. This wasn't contract negotiations, but it had just this formal feeling about it. And it was only like maybe, 20 people there. And one of the managers said, you came in right after lunch, and the lunch stuff and donuts and coffee and sodas are still there. If anybody wants to hang around, and help us get rid of this, and people are laughing. So a lot, not maybe half the people stayed around, and so now here are some managers and some union people, and they're not sitting in their prescribed seats. I remember a couple people were sitting on a windowsill. Somebody was leaning against a door. It was like, and they just had this conversation. And this was just over coffee and donuts and that. And after the hourly people left, the manager said, that was better than the meeting. And it just had that feel. So anything that can kind of have that feel of, it's just John, just you and me talking to each other, can really help that. And that's where I would want to get the team involved in doing that, rather than I heard some podcast with some idiot, and here's what he suggests. Let's do that. So
no, that's good. Yeah. So how is it that we as leaders can more effectively motivate and whether our employees are remote or in the office, we're together, motivate them than the kind of the traditional "I'm your boss, do it because this is your job" kind of way of doing things?
Well, yeah, it's a really good question, and it's the answer. It doesn't have to be all that hard, but somehow we tend to make it really hard. And what I believe is kind of the human stuff. I think of it as like support for change and all of that. Often we treat the human thing as a separate activity. Sort of like, okay, we're going to get the work done. We're going to really, man, every Tuesday afternoon we're going to do this and this, and then we're going to, excuse me, and then we're going to have pizza on Fridays. Well, first, it's a separate event. It takes more time, and so we sometimes think to actually get people involved, to actually have a conversation that's back and forth, rather than you're in charge and I'm just trying to say, John, that's brilliant. Oh yeah, you did it again. That's something that there's more give and take. If we build it in, that's part of what we're doing, we have a much better chance of actually people liking to be there. Can I give you a couple examples?
Absolutely.
Okay. There's a company called Rhino Foods, like rhinoceros, and they make dessert ingredients. So they sell to manufacturers like Ben and Jerry's. They don't sell to the public. And and it's a family-owned company, about 90 people. And the owner got up in front of people and he said, this is everybody there. He said, I have some really bad news. He said, our whole industry has been in a slump. And he said, it's one of those things I thought maybe it'll last a month or so. It's not. It's just going on and on. And I've done everything I know to do to cut costs. And the only thing left to do and still be able to stay in business is to downsize. And he said, I have never done that before. I don't want to do it now, but I don't see a choice. Now, a lot of us have been in meetings like that, and it's usually very uncomfortable for everyone. And the person making the announcement then says, but here's HR to tell you what's going to happen. And nobody wants, it's just very tense. What he did, and I think it was right just on the fly, he said, look, folks, I think I've thought of everything, but if you have any ideas that you think might help us increase revenue or reduce costs, I'm willing to consider them. Like I say, I'm not optimistic, but hey, I'm glad to seriously look at anything. 90 people, they came up with 111 ideas.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and he pulled some people together and said, there's a lot of good stuff here. What can we use? And they boiled it down into 5 major categories. And they weathered the storm with no layoffs. 2 years later, the industry took a dip again. They pulled that off the shelf and did it again. And what it was for me, it's a really simple thing of just that if any of you have any ideas, I'll take them seriously. It's not making a promise. I mean, it's just a tiny thing. And he's not saying, let's hold a special meeting to brainstorm. None of that. It's just this extra little thing. If you got something, please tell me. I'll take it seriously. Mm-hmm. And I see that kind of stuff happen, and it just makes such a big difference. And often there can be a number of reasons. Some of it is people are so busy that it feels like we don't have time for that. And the answer is no. Actually, the meetings are going to take less time, I think, if we do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like we don't have time not to.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
I think I don't know what it is or where it came from, but not being transparent with your employees and open is one of those things that I've seen it happen so many times, but I don't get it. Like I am extremely transparent with my team because it makes my job so much easier if I don't have to like hide things and not tell somebody this thing or that thing. If just say, hey, look, we're in this together. We all work for the same place. We have the same mission, the same goal in mind. Let's just share. Let's just be open. And it makes my life so much easier. I don't know why some leaders just feel like they can't be transparent and honest.
And unfortunately, what you're saying is actually more common than not.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they don't do it either. There's a company called International Harvester. They make tractors. And they had a contract to build 800 tractors for the Soviet Union. So this is about 30 years ago. And they were so excited to get a contract with 800 tractors that they negotiated poorly. And they said, and the Russians said, we want 800 tractors by October 1st. And they said, got it. And they said, but any that come in after that to make it up, you'll sell it to us at a deep discount. Oh yeah, no problem. And it gets to be August, and the executives are meeting, and it's clear, I'm making up the numbers now, but they got 800 as our goal, and they built like 250 so far. Yes, exactly. And is this a video podcast?
No, it's just audio. So they didn't see me hit my hip
forehead. Right, John just slapped his head. So the jury will note that John just slapped his head. And so this one guy named Jack Stack, one of the VPs, said, we got to tell the troops. Mm-hmm. And he said, why? He said, well, they're the ones who are building the tractors. And he said, no, you can't do that. And he goes, why? And he said, look, it's going to depress them. And then productivity is even going to go down further. And he said, no, I don't agree. And they said, Jack, you cannot tell anybody this. Promise, you will not talk about this with people. And he goes, okay. So he goes out and he takes a huge sheet of paper, he writes on his door, target 800, 650 to go, or whatever the number, maybe it's 550 to go, whatever it is. And that's all he wrote, because everybody walking by knew exactly what it was. And people started saying, is that true? we're going to take a bath on this thing. And workers started talking about, well, why are we so behind? And the reason they were behind is one of the parts that the engineers had negotiated with a contractor to send was really late in getting stuff there. And somebody said, one of the hourly workers, Home Depot sells that same part. Now, the people who are working out on the line, they're the ones who go to Home Depot on the weekends. The executives weren't. And others said, oh, yeah. So they would go down on their own and buy exactly the same part, and they got things moving. So by October 1st, they had built 805 trackers that met specifications. And so you talked about the power. It makes your life easier. It makes the company work. It's just sort of a win-win for everybody as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It's one of those things where I was talking to somebody many years ago, and it stuck with me what they said. But they said, for some reason, executives buy, products in bulk to save money and things like that. And let's say they're buying, cleaners for the toilets, but they're not asking the people that are actually cleaning the toilets which products to get. And, they think they're getting a good deal because they're buying this bulk amount, but they're buying the most expensive stuff or the stuff that doesn't do a good job that the person has to use twice as much of. And the guy knows, like, I can just go out here and buy something way cheaper. It did the job so much better. But there's that lack of communication and lack of visibility. And I remember hearing that, and I think, well, why on earth would I not talk to the person that's actually going to be using the product and not talk to the people on the line and not get their input and let them know why I'm doing things? Because I feel like maybe it is that we believe that people have a malicious intent, but I believe everybody has that people aren't malicious. There's a few, but most people have good intent. So if we give them the benefit of the doubt and are transparent up front and ask for their advice and their help, we're going to get positive feedback back. And I've seen it with my team over and over again. I don't go in and tell them this is how we're going to do stuff. I always ask, what would you like? What would you think the best way? And I realize the people that are actually doing it hands-on are going to make better choices than me that are hands-off.
Yeah. And what's the risk? So just take the cleaning products. Okay, so let's say people were out to get you, and so you get an order of bad stuff. Okay, you learn something. That's not likely to happen, but it's such a small risk to take to get their brains involved. I remember when the quality movement was really big in America and just starting, and the auto manufacturers were really starting to take it seriously. They were learning from the Japanese companies, and I remember hearing an auto worker, a guy on the line. He said, "Yeah, in the past, the auto industry has hired us from our neck down. They never ask opinions. They never wanted anything from us other than
work."
Yeah. And I thought that was just a very telling, kind of sobering kind of comment to make.
Yeah, so how can we as leaders get people out of that rut? How can we get them get them doing the right thing? Because one of the jobs as a leader is to grow your people into leaders. So when I'm helping develop the next generation of leaders, what can I do to help encourage that?
Okay, I tend to ask my clients just a couple of questions, like and I'll say, okay, so a scale of 1 to 5, how important is it going to be for people to really be in the loop with what's going on? 5 would be high. And it's okay to answer 1. 1 would be really low. But I can only help you. I can only give you ideas if you're answering 4 or 5. So when I give you answers right now, John, it'll be for people who say, yeah, this is really important. And then I generally ask a couple other questions. But that one's a really big one because the key thing is mindset. That I could give you the best information available on how to play bagpipes. But you go, I'm really not interested in playing bagpipes. I appreciate you coming by and giving me these lessons. But that we do training all the time. We do this stuff. We give people skills, and there's no place to use the skills. It's all kind of crazy. So where I would start is, what's your mindset? Do you think that yes, this is a good idea? And then where I would start with people is I'd say, don't start with some big event. Don't bring everybody in and have hundreds of people there and all the kind that you may want to do that at some point. But right now, start with that meeting that you have on Tuesday afternoon that bores people to death. Just take a regular routine conference call or meeting, virtual or in person, and say, what's a simple thing we could do to add vitality to this meeting, to add some energy, some forward momentum. And quite often, it can be really, really easy. There isn't a one size fits all, but it's just enough. I mean, I've been in meetings where people have said, okay, we've got to leave time for Q&A, question and answer, and then they don't. Well, that would be, or that you ask a question and 15 minutes later, I'm done giving my answer. I mean, it's just, you could say, all right, here's what we got to do. Let's take Q&A seriously, and let's make sure that our ratio of us talking and them talking is, 20% to 80% or whatever. But just say we're going to give X number of minutes, and Mary, would you facilitate that so that we keep on track? So we're not doing all the talking. Something just really simple. And let's try it as an experiment, see if it works. So starting with these really little things. Do I have time for one other story?
Oh, you have time for plenty of stories, but let me interject one thing. One thing that I've noticed is that a lot of times those meetings that you're talking about with the Q&A at the end, I think the whole structure of the meeting is set up wrong, because a lot of times the leaders will come in there with, instead of saying, here's the situation, they also say, here's the solution. And a lot of times that's the wrong approach for a leader to come in there with, but we're taught, and I fall into the same trap too. I do this to my people. I say, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. You know what? Well, when I do that, I'm teaching them to go and present solutions and not be curious about what the problems are and ask other people, and I fall into that same trap too. And I do it myself. But I think if we can start by saying, here's the situation, and I've got some ideas of what I want to do, but before I give you my ideas, I want to open the floor for you guys to ask questions and offer any suggestions or ideas that you have. And then I'll end with my ideas and kind of break it up to the Q&A in the middle now, instead of at the end.
I love that. Yeah. And for some people, just having question and answer is a giant step for them.
Correct.
So I might start there, but for you, it sounds like no. That would be, and I think flipping that so people actually are giving information and they're following their own curiosity is a great way. And for some people, I want to help keep the leader, him or herself, in their own comfort zone.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had leaders. I remember one time I got a call. They'd been in a workshop I gave, and they said, "Hey, you said we could call. We got this meeting coming up next week, and we're presenting this idea, and it's just not going to go over well, and we need some ideas." And I said, "Okay, great." And I said, "Tell me about it." And they said, "Well, it's going to be 90 people, and we're going to present this idea for a new production line or something like that." And it's just not going to go over. And I said, "Well, tell me about the room." And the room was kind of a college setup, like, the rows are stacked, so it's tiered seating, and the tables are bolted down so people can't get up and move around. So right away we know that if once you take your seat, that's where you're going to be, and you might be able to turn to the person on your left or your right, but that's it. So there's some constraints there. And I said, all right, so how about this? And they said, we got 90 minutes. So I said, okay, great. How about this? Why don't you take the first 5 minutes and say, here's what we want to cover, and make it engaging. Doesn't mean they have to like it, but they go, whoa. And then, just give them kind of a snapshot, and then say, turn to the person next to you, what's your reactions to that? And I said, and then you can ask people what they think. And they got silent. And I said, what's going on, guys? And they said, we can't do that. And I said, why? And they said, it's too touchy-feely. And I said, wait a minute, asking people to talk to each other, no, you just can't do that. And so what I had to realize is what was in my comfort zone wasn't in their comfort zone. So we started exploring what would work, what could you do to kind of open it up, and I forget what we came up with. But the idea is it has to be comfortable for that leader as well as those people, or else it's just something out of a textbook. It's something that you heard some guy on a podcast talk about. But I would keep it really, really simple. But the story I was going to tell, which really helps me a lot, when I first went into consulting, I'd had a lot of training in how groups work and facilitating meetings and blah, blah, all that stuff. And I got hired by a government agency of one of our states that they were having a problem between management and labor in this one unit. And they decided to hold a retreat, a 3-day retreat to deal with these issues. And they said, would you facilitate it? So I'm feeling great. Sure, I've learned all these skills. And you know, this is not the end of the story, by the way. So I get there, and these people really did not like each other. And it starts kind of politely enough with introductions, and then you can feel the heat rise in the room. And then people are starting to go, yeah, but you guys, some finger pointing. And then as that's going, now I'm thinking, oh, this is great because we're getting stuff out on the table. And then the most amazing thing happened. Suddenly they all turned and started attacking me. And I'm going, what? No, I mean, it was just being beaten about the head and neck. And I got time for a break. And I had hired a really experienced consultant to work with me on it. It's a guy named Lloyd Richards. And he, you know, he said, so, what do you think? And I said, it's awful. I mean, he said, no, it's not. He's smiling. He said, no, it's fine. And I said, what are you talking about, Lloyd? You saw what happened. He said, yeah, people are upset. And I don't, we got 2.5 days left of this thing. And he said, Rick, this storm has been brewing for a very long time. But now all those clouds are in the room together and they're creating lightning. And you are the highest point. And you got a choice. Right now, you're standing there like an oak tree. And so all the lightning is just hitting you, just bam. And he said, you've got an option. You can continue to do that, which you probably are not going to like, or imagine you're a lightning rod. And that lightning has nothing to do with you, and it just goes through you on into the ground. That bit of advice, really simple, has helped me for 40 years. I don't always remember it, but when I do remember, it helps me stay standing and also helps me differentiate when they really are mad at me for something I did versus what they're doing with each other. But just that shift started to change how we had the conversation. First of all, I wasn't a player in the conversation anymore. I was there to help kind of.
You were just facilitator.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And I like the idea of being the lightning rod and letting it go through you and not just, absorbing all that energy and exploding.
Yeah.
So cool.
So one thing, let me just make it so if people don't want to do a lightning rod, is like, what's something that you're really comfortable with that you could do in an existing phone call or an existing meeting that might make it a little bit better? I find that there's so many meetings, like on big projects, that are just a waste of time. I remember talking right before COVID, I was walking to a meeting with a client, and he was one of the senior people. And I said, so what's the agenda today? And he said, oh, it's probably one of those meetings where we're going to fill out forms and rearrange items on a priority list. I mean, just cynical. And you get in the meeting, and people were just going through the motions. So the next week, they're going to be doing the same thing because they really didn't do it last week. And so meetings just go on and on and on, as opposed to somebody who might say, hey, today, I think our goal ought to be to figure out what the top 5 priorities are, top 3, and be able to defend to the senior office why we think those are most important. So we got to get started because we only have an hour and a half. Let's go. And see, does it work? Does it not work? But something that is, you're using the same people, the same place, the same bad coffee, and you're saying, how can I shape this a little differently so we might actually get something done?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good idea. And, shifting things up again, even if they don't work, just the getting out of that same routine of not being productive, let's say you try something like that and you don't go anywhere. You get nothing done in an hour and a half. Well, guess what? You learn not to do that anymore.
Exactly.
Exactly right.
And
if you go back to the old thing, it might be like, hey, let's not do that other thing we did last time. Let's actually work this time and make it happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, you get that happening sometimes too. Just the idea of shaking things up a bit every now and then is, I think it's valuable to your brain, getting your brain to carve new paths.
There's another story that I wrote down that there's an organization that does big contracts. They'll build reservoirs and dams and roads and all that generally for government agencies. And they were having a lot of projects going way over time and way over budget and not coming in meeting the goals they were supposed to meet. So they tried something new, and they invited people. There might be like, I don't know, it's like 30, 40 different stakeholder groups might be in on that. So it might be the contractor for surveying, the contractor for the customer who's this agency over here. And they would invite people, but they say, you have to be able to make decisions for your organization. You can't come and say, oh, Sue couldn't make it, I'm representing her today, but she's really interested. That won't work. So you now know everybody in the room is there and they can make decisions about what you're going to do. And so the facilitator gets up and says, all right, so look, we already have the plan. You all got the contract. Everybody knows what the plan is supposed to be. But when I look around the room, 40 people, we have centuries of experience here today. What I want you to do is talk about what could go wrong. You've all looked at the plan. What could go? We never ask what could go wrong publicly. And so you're sitting at tables, and you're purposely not sitting with your friends. I mean, you're sitting with strangers. And these people start to brainstorm. And my friends told me the room sometimes would be filled with flip chart sheets with all the things that could go wrong. And then they'd say, okay, this is quite a list. Which of these are the real killers, the really big ones? And so they would vote. And they'd say, all right, and let's say there are 20 of those. They'd say, all right, this table, I'd like you to take the first two, and this table take the second two, and so on. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to come up with a plan, a very simple plan that if that problem comes up, what are you going to do? And do not say we're going to have teamwork and cooperation. You've got to be really specific. And so it might be something's late on some part of the project. Okay, somebody from John's office is going to call somebody from Rick's office, or John is going to call Rick, and we're going to come to agreement on these 3 points. Bam, bam, bam. First thing is we're going to go out and look at the site. Second thing, and we have to come to agreement on that. And so they'd all report out, and everybody there could vote and say, yeah, I'll abide by that. And by the end of it, they had this workbook, like a cookbook. Like, oh, if this happens, turn to page 42. And people knew, okay, I'm supposed to call John, here's what we're going to talk about. Two things happened, is when problems came up, they got solved a lot quicker because they'd already thought about this. And in my view, they also had started to build relationships already. So it wasn't that stranger. But the second thing they didn't expect is fewer problems came up. And once again, it's, I think, because people were talking about it and they're already thinking about what could go wrong. And there's a lot of energy in talking about what could go wrong, provided you put it in a container.
Yeah. And we do something like that on the cybersecurity side, where we do like, what is our plan for a ransomware attack? What is our plan for a breach? What's our plan for data exfiltration? And, going through the scenarios of how we would do this. Oh, but what if this happened? So like, okay, we got ransomware. We had to shut down all of our servers. They're all encrypted. What do we do? Oh, we restore from backups. Oh, but what if the backup servers hit? Okay, so how would we go back? And going through the process and playing it out in a conference room makes it to where, you think about the ideas like, oh crap, we don't have that backed up somewhere else. Let's do that. Let's take care of this piece. And then You're right. Then you have less problems because you've thought through the things that could go wrong. And then if an event happens, heaven forbid, it doesn't, but if it does, your team is not only more confident in themselves about how to do it, they also have played through this in their mind several times, just like the athlete before they go up to the plate at bat. They've played through this scenario, 50 times, and their nerves are going to get to them as much. You're going to be more confident in the decisions, and we have a plan that's in place that we can just execute.
Something hadn't occurred to me, but hearing you talk about it is it's also doing something so we don't have to hide what could be seen as a mistake. then I don't have to kind of keep covering it over. I go, okay, this is happening. I got to pick up the phone and call John. That it's more part of the culture that, it's that hiding stuff that really can get in the way that we filtering information. So, yeah.
Yep, 100%. Rick, I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm glad you came back on the show. If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about how they can find out more about you and the things that you're working on and connect with you online.
Yeah, sure. First of all, my website is the best place to go to find out about me. And the spelling of my name will be in the little bio that John will put up, but it's Rick, R-I-C-K, M-A-U-R-E-R, M-A-U-R-E-R, rickmaurer.com. And if you go there, there's a ton of free resources. There's videos and there's assessment tools and all articles on it. But there's also on the homepage, there's a book that I put out last year called Seizing Moments of Possibility. And the ebook version is free. So all you have to do is put your email address in and you'll get the book like immediately. And it covers kind of the principles and ideas behind what John and I have been talking about today. So there's a lot of stuff there. And if you have questions, give me a call. My phone number's there, my email's there. I love talking about this stuff. I think that might have come across. So
Awesome. Well, Rick, appreciate having you back on the show. And thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, John.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.